in a minute. We're going to be live. And we've got another one coming in. In the meantime, I will have to share the screen. Upload the meetings control. Great. So, Art, I'm not sure. Can you hear us? Welcome to the workshop. Can you just confirm that you're hearing us, please?
Hello. Yeah, I can see production assistance when war is home.
Okay, great. What about Art? Art, A-R-T. Okay, we got Sergey also coming in. Okay, great. Art, positive, fantastic. Sergey, good evening and welcome to the workshop. Can you hear us? Sergey, can you hear us? Okay, just waiting for the connection to establish. Sergey, can you hear us?
I can see and hear you. Production assistance when war is home, but I'm not Sergey.
Okay, Sergey is also saying it's positive. Okay, great. Well, then I guess we will move on. Thank you, everybody, for deciding to join this workshop. This is quite an important workshop for pretty much everybody who wants to work with foreign correspondents in their native countries. And I can take the liberty to say that this is pretty much the first workshop of its kind in the history of journalism, sort of to say, because there's never been a training as such dedicated to what traditionally used to be called fixers, translators, and interpreters for foreign correspondents working in different in the countries outside their home country. And I can say that in discussion with Laura Oliver of the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism in Oxford University, that we could agree that definitely fixers are wrongly called fixers. They're no longer our fixers, but they're production assistants. The reason why they are production assistants because you guys help to produce a story, and therefore you're assisting to produce a story. Hence why you should be rightly called and identified as a production assistant, but not as a fixer anymore. So I will move forward. I hope everybody can see the screen now. And I will just open it in the full slideshow. So we'll go on. I will be explaining pretty much every paragraph that will be seen on the screen. And please, each and every one of you, if you have any questions, either take notes and address the question at the end of the presentation, or you can stop me and you can ask me, Vudi, what does it mean, this particular paragraph, and so on and so forth. However, I will do my best to elaborate every single paragraph as in many details as I can. So, production assistance when war is home. A production assistant is a journalist aide. It's a journalist supporter. Is a person that's assisting a journalist. It can be a reporter, a photographer, or a filmmaker themselves, or an activist interested in the politics of their own country. They are a bridge between their country and a foreign correspondent or a news crew. They're someone who knows the national and local politics of their country. They're a native speaker of the local language with an understanding of local dialects. They are an expert in their country's national and local geography. Expert is not really, I've used a big word, but like, you are an expert comparing to a foreign correspondent coming in a country that doesn't know anything, So the fact that you know about your country's politics, national, local, and regional, and you know your country's geography, that makes you an expert. That makes you a person without whom a story can't be produced by a foreign correspondent. A production assistant is a link with national and local social networks, media outlets, and political organizations. It means you know the local and national leaders of social networks, of different social groups of your country. Doesn't mean you know them personally, but it means you just know where to ring a phone, where to knock at the door if a foreign correspondent asks you and say, I would like to speak with a religious leader of the Christian people in Kiev, or I would like to speak with a religious leader of the Jewish people or the Muslim people in Kiev. So you would kind of know who these people are, and you would say, okay, well, we need to go to this particular church or to this particular synagogue or to this particular, mosque or a place where people gather in and pray. So also, as a production assistant, you're a link to the media outlets and political organizations, meaning you can take that foreign correspondent to meet with an editor of a local newspaper or a national newspaper, or with the representatives or a leader of a political party or a political organization that works in your home country. So production assistants, these people are the person hired by a foreign correspondent or news crew to help arrange the production of a story. Therefore, they are production assistants. These are the people that before and even until today are called fixers. Let us take the pledge that we're no longer going to call these people fixers, but we'll call them for what they are, and they are production assistants. What is expected of a production assistant? That they've lived in the country in question for at least the preceding 3 years. That means over the last 3 years, you've been living in your native country. That's what's expected, because if you lived over the last 3 years in your native country, then you've had enough time to observe, to understand, and to see what's going on with regards to social and political issues in your home country. And these are the very issues what a foreign correspondent would be interested to. And therefore, if you lived over the last 3 years, that's very important that you've seen and you've observed enough to see what's going on in the country. It is expected that they are a native speaker of its language and local dialects. So you're expected not just to understand your own language where you come from, of the country you come from, but also local dialects, because there are different dialects of different people or maybe minorities that could be speaking in different parts of the country. It is expected that they are conversant with its past and present political and cultural affairs. That means it is expected from you that you know the history of your country, that you know the past, that you know the present of what's going on, and you kind of have an opinion and a view of why is it happening, what's happening, what could be the reason why, what's happening to trigger a situation of what's going on. It's very important. It is expected that they are au fait with its state actors and understand their affiliations and motivations. Au fait means you have a good understanding you have a good knowledge, you know the state actors. Just a simple situation where a foreign correspondent says, okay, who is the president of the country? It is expected that you know. Who is the oppositional political leader of the country? Then it is expected that you know. And it is expected you kind of know the affiliations of political parties also in the country, and what are the motivations between those links and affiliations and connections. Also, it is expected that they are familiar with how its public services work at local, regional, and national level. In the case of war or no war, if a foreign correspondent says, okay, we've heard that 20 people died because of a pandemic outbreak in a local region of your country, it's expected for you to know where to knock at the door, who is responsible to deal with that situation, or there is a war going on, then it is expected that for you to know what's going to happen, how is the authorities going to respond in the local level, regional level, and national level in the country. It is expected that they are capable of setting up meetings with political, social, and religious leaders. That means if a foreign correspondent is asking you to meet with a oppositional political leader or with the country's president or prime minister or a minister, that means you're capable to say, okay, we know who to contact to arrange this meeting. That means you know how to get to that website, or to call the secretary, or to call the press office, or to call anyone that potentially could be responsible or could be helpful to arrange that meeting with regards to the interest of a foreign correspondent and why they are asking to meet this person of public responsibility in order to produce a story thereafter. It is expected that they can act as a bridge of fluent communication between the correspondent or crew that has hired them and any local protagonist, be they a private individual, politician, or other state actors. So just what I said previously, it's very important that you don't kind of come in a situation where you will have to ask the foreign correspondent and say, okay, so you want to talk to the Minister of Defense, but I don't know who should I contact to arrange a meeting between you and the Minister of Defense. So this is not okay, right? But it is okay when you're like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll contact the press office, because, you understand the logical sense of it, and then you understand that it's the press office. Or you can say, well, I know a friend, or I know a person from work that they have direct communication with Ministry of Defense or Ministry of Economy or Ministry of Police, and I can call them and just see if they can help to arrange this quickly. The more contacts you have, the better it is, the faster the job can be done. And the reason why it is also important for things to get quickly done is because the foreign correspondents, when they come on assignment in your home country, they happen to be short in time. They happen to have a 2 weeks or 3 weeks assignment, or maybe 1 month, or maybe 2 days. So that's why it's really expected for you to know all these things in advance, and be able to communicate and be very a fluent communicator, a bridge between the foreign correspondent you're working with and the country's authorities that they need to be in touch. And be aware, just to remind you, you don't work for a foreign correspondent. You work with a foreign correspondent. The reason why it is with is because without you, a foreign correspondent cannot do their job. Therefore, you are together in that story. Therefore, you are together on that assignment. A foreign correspondent is not more important than you. and vice versa. Why? Because without you, they cannot produce the story. And without them, you also cannot wire that story on that particular news organization. Therefore, you're equals and therefore you're working together. Right. So we're moving to the next. What is expected of a foreign correspondent or news crew? It is expected that they have recent training in hostile environment and first aid awareness. So this is a line of bullet points where I'm going to have to, where I'm explaining to you what you expect, what can you expect from a foreign correspondent when the war is home, when they're coming to report a war in your home country. So it is expected that they have a recent training in hostile environment and first aid awareness. It's called HEFAT. It is expected that they carry a first aid kit, flak jacket, and ballistic helmet clearly marked press. It is expected that they have fully researched the country's politics, geography, culture, and history. It is expected that in the case of a news crew, they have a first aid kit, flak jacket, and ballistic helmet as a backup for each of their production assistants, including but not limited to their driver. That means if you are working with a news crew, okay, or a foreign correspondent, you can expect that they should have available for you a flak jacket, ballistic helmet, and first aid kit available. Specifically, if it's war, you can expect that they should have this. What are the rules of engagement? That the production assistant's role is to act as a translator and a guide, arranging local interviews that the correspondent or crew would otherwise not have been able to access without you. That a correspondent or crew, therefore, accords to its production equal status as a respected and valued member of the team. This means a foreign correspondent you're working with or a news crew you're working with, they should respect your personal integrity and they should respect that you as a production assistant are an equal person working together in the story you are producing. It is also expected that the correspondent or crew priorities the health and safety of the production assistant are over the demands of delivering a news story, and that no unnecessary risk be taken that puts any member of the team in jeopardy. This means they should never put your health and safety at risk over an interest of producing a story. What does a production assistant need to know about health and safety? Your life is as much in danger as that of the correspondent or the crew you're working with. That they will leave your country and you will remain home. Always protect yourself. Always protect your reputation. That's very important. If a foreign correspondent asks you to do something with your native country's politics or social leaders or a protagonist that they may not wish, and you doing something what you're being asked to means your reputation can go in jeopardy. You should never agree to do that because you're staying home, a foreign correspondent is going to go away. Okay? So you are the one that should be taking care of yourself with this regard. Again, always protect yourself, always protect your reputation, always prioritize your safety above all else. Never transgress the boundaries you set for yourself, okay? Every one of us has their own principles. human and professional. We should never accept to transgress those boundaries of the principles we've set, regardless who the request is coming from. If we feel like that's not safe to do, if you feel like what you're being asked to do by a foreign correspondent means your reputation is going to go into jeopardy in your home country, you should not do it. Never agree to a higher rate in return for risking your life. I would like to share with you a particular experience where there has been different news crews where they have asked a native fixer of the time, but in fact they are a production assistant, saying, we will pay you a couple of £1,000s above the pay rate that we agreed if you agree to go and take pictures or film a particular area where the actual war was going on. If that's the case, never agree to it, because your life is worth more than the money. You know it. Also, never agree to do a job on your own on the promise of future work. There could be cases, there has been cases before, when network news crews promised their production assistant that, oh, if you're going to do this for us, it could be a chance that we will give you a contract for you to work with us. Or if you're going to do this for us, it could be a chance that we will put you in a contract of a daily retainer. A daily retainer means whether you manage to send a story or not, pictures or videos for the news network, you will be paid. Doesn't matter whether the material is going or not. Please do not agree with it, because that is just not the case, and it will not happen. So, what must a production assistant do if their health and safety are threatened by a foreign correspondent's demands or a news crew? If you advise a correspondent or crew against going to a particular location because you know either categorically or instinctively that it's dangerous, you just should not go. If they pressurize you in any way to overrule your judgment, you must report them. If they insist on going without you and in spite of your warnings, you should alert a union of journalists in your home country, also in international levels, such as the International Federation of Journalists. You should alert a press freedom organization such as Reporters Without Borders, or a human rights organization such as Amnesty International. Okay? If there are people like that you come across such experiences, please don't just disagree to do work with them, but also report them. It is very important, because if you have enough resilience to not do what they ask you and what they pressurize you to do, they might find somebody else who might not be enough resilient and who might be choosing to do what they should not do, and therefore their life is in danger. Hence why it is very important that if you come across these people, you must report them. What must the production assistant do to ensure their health and safety? Understand that the very real danger your job presents to your well-being. Appreciate the implication of sustaining life-threatening wounds or injuries, and demand access to a personal first aid kit, flak jacket, and ballistic helmet. Refuse to work with any news crew that doesn't provide access to any of the above. Learn basic first aid and be familiar with the contents and use of your kit. In case you don't have a personal first aid kit and you're working with a news crew that is actually providing it, It is very important that you ask one of them to train you, because they should have already a HEPA training, and you should ask them to train you how to use a first aid kit. It's very important. A news organization must have in place the budget and the logistics to ensure the health and safety of all of its crew. If they don't, my strong recommendation is simply don't work with them. You should not accept to work with a news crew whose entire crew are wearing flak jackets, are wearing ballistic helmets, and they have a first aid personal kit, but they didn't think about you. You should not work with these people. You should, of course, you should be open to discuss and talk, and you should demand what I said above: access to personal first aid kit, flak jacket, and ballistic helmet. If they cannot provide, if they don't want to provide, you don't want to work with these people. That is my recommendation. Essential kit. We spoke of a flak jacket, which could be this and this, and it can make you look like this. So there is also an interesting link that I would like to share later with you on the chat for you guys to read. So, how can a production assistant ensure their mental and emotional well-being? Stop working immediately for any correspondent or crew that treats you with disrespect or overrules your personal integrity. If they treat you with disdain, they don't care about you. If they don't care about you, they may put you at risk. Whatever happens, never intentionally endanger them. In return, please always maintain a united front, protect one another. Please communicate with all colleagues who work as a production assistant for foreign correspondents in order to have a united front of a principle on the basis of what you work. Health and safety is very important, as you know it, and I'd like to remind you to please maintain that principle and do not work for news crews that are not willing to make sure they're going to put a priority into the health and safety of yourselves. So, in case you come across these people, again, as I said before, report them if their behavior crosses a line. Report them if they threaten to not pay you. And if they threaten to not pay you, don't just report them, but stop working for them immediately. Okay? Because these people with such mindset, you don't want to work with such people. They're gonna put you in real danger. And of course, report them if they subsequently don't pay you. Because there are so many ways how you can hold them into account if you report them to the previous organizations that I mentioned to you. But I will share this material with each and every one of you, of course. So, what is a production assistant entitled to? To be fairly compensated by being paid a day rate commensurate with your work. To be fairly compensated for tasks undertaken ahead of a crew's arrival in your country. In this second paragraph, if there is a news crew or a foreign correspondent that has contacted you before they arrived in your home country, and they have decided to ask you to do a research for, I don't know, whatever topic they're interested to produce a story, or they have asked you to prepare or arrange a meeting with a particular individual, protagonist of political or state actors, you have to charge them for a full day rate for the day you work before they have arrived. Okay? Don't just do the work for free. Before they have arrived in your home country, if they're asking you to do something, to do a job, to do a research, they have to pay you for that day as a full day rate. And you're entitled to that. So a production assistant is entitled to be fairly compensated also for all expenses, food, accommodation, telecommunication, and transport. If you're asked to work with a foreign correspondent, be it a journalist or a photographer or a filmmaker of an established news organization, or you're working with a news crew, they have to pay all your expenses other than your day rate that you have agreed to work with them for. They have to pay your food, they have to pay your accommodation, they have to pay your input in your telephone, because you're going to make a lot of calls to arrange the meetings and to arrange everything to make sure it's set for the story they are producing. They have to pay for that too, and the internet that you use, and of course the transport. Meaning, if they rent a car, you're going to be on their car, or if they decide to rent your car, you're going to have to charge them. If they say if you have a car and working with us, you really have to charge them extra money for the car. Because if you didn't have the car, they would have to rent it anyway. So there is budget available for that. It is expected, and obviously production assistant is entitled to be fairly treated, as I said before, as an equal and mutually valuable member of the production crew. To be credited as a production assistant in a news story you've helped to produce. Your name and last name should be on the byline of a journalistic article, reportage, photo reportage, or a television story, whatever that be. Whenever the credits are available, you should be credited on the byline for the story that you helped to produce. How should a production assistant enter a deal? Never work for free, for a credit, for a byline, or for exposure. You are already exposed to risk. We're talking about the situation when war is home. If somebody offers you to work for them, saying, "Oh, if you work for me, I'm gonna credit you with assisting me to produce a story, but I don't have money to pay you." That means they can say, that means you're being exposed for potential stories and potential jobs. Don't buy that. Okay? You're going to deal with a foreign correspondent to work, you have to be paid with money. And of course, byline is something you're entitled to because you are a production assistant. And my recommendation is, do not work with a crew that disagrees to put your byline and credits on the story that they produce. When I'm saying you're already exposed to risk is you are living in a home where there is war. So you don't need any more exposure. You need to get paid for the service and assistance, professional assistance that you do. Agree on a deal before you undertake any work and get it in writing. Okay? When you set an agreement with a foreign correspondent or a news crew, set an agreement in writing. Write it by hand or write it by computer as whatever circumstances allows you to, but make sure every single detail is written properly and that you have an agreement at hand and these people sign it. There is an address of the news organization. There is a contact information of the person with name and last name, with an email address, with a telephone number, and a signature. My recommendation is don't agree to work without having something in writing. Make sure it sets out how many days you're expected to work and what you will be doing. That agreement should explain, the foreign correspondent or news crew should explain what are you expected to be doing for them, okay? And how many days they expect you to work with them. Ensure you're paid weekly if you're working for longer than 7 days. Okay? Do not agree to be paid by a bank transaction. Remember, you are in a war zone. The banks may be bombed, the banking system may not be working. The money that can get you from A to B in a war zone with you and your family is the cash. Therefore, you should have cash available. Therefore, agree to be paid only in cash. And if you're going to be working with them more than 7 days, ask them to get to pay you weekly if they cannot pay you every day. Or sometimes you can ask to be paid every third day because you have the right to ask for it. And it's your money anyway. Set out your terms that safety equipment is provided and all expenses are remunerated. Okay? When you set the deal with a news crew or a foreign correspondent, make sure that in that deal, it is included that safety equipment is provided to you and all expenses are covered. Things that I just mentioned before, such as flak jacket, ballistic helmet, first aid personal kit, and expenses of going with them, having to be fed with food alongside with them, with drinks, and also with transportation and sleep. You know, the foreign correspondent cannot expect you to find a family member or a friend casually to go and to sleep in their house because they don't want to pay you for the hotel to sleep with them because somehow it's expensive. You should not accept that. Okay? Demand that you are trained how to use the first aid kit you will be expecting them to provide. This also should be within the deal that you set with them. And finally, be realistic and don't promise what you know or suspect you cannot deliver. Okay? There could be requests from news crews where some of them will say, oh, we need you to take us to the front line when the actual heavy fighting or heavy artillery is happening. If you think you are not prepared to do that, you have to tell them no. That is something you cannot expect from me. Okay? But if you think that somehow it's safe to do that because you have the right connections with the army and people you trust and so on and so forth, again, it's your responsibility to say, yes, I could consider doing that, but depends on the circumstances, how they will show up. Perhaps we might get to that point, you know? But again, please do not promise what you realistically cannot deliver, okay? That's very important. How should a production assistant exit a deal? While it's your responsibility to honor the deal you agreed, if you consider it's not safe for you to continue to work with that particular crew or with that particular foreign correspondent, you have the right to resign. Okay? Regardless for how long you have agreed to work with them. If you feel unsafe, you just say, I do not want to work with you anymore. I do not feel safe and I'd like to leave. Okay? If you choose to resign, you have the right to be paid up until the last minute you worked with that for a correspondent or with that news crew. If you resign, demand to be driven to a safe place. The crew is professionally and morally obliged to fulfill their responsibility to you as long as it is possible to do so without jeopardy. They're not permitted to abandon you in the middle of an assignment. Okay? Do not feel ashamed or under pressure. Demand your fundamental rights. Okay? It's not shame to feel afraid. It's not shame to say, I am afraid. It is your right to be afraid, and it is absolutely normal to be afraid. You are a human being like everybody is, and therefore, if you're afraid to do something, to continue to do something, you have the right to say so, and you should say, and move forward, and ask them to drive you back to the safe place, and ask them to pay you for until the last minute you've been working with them. So, how should a production assistant set a rate? As a freelancer, you are entitled to determine the value of your service. However, there is a reasonable market rate in place that makes it possible for everyone to do their best work. Those who abide by it are not only appropriately remunerated, but also ensure they don't undercut others, thereby undermining the perceived value of the service you offer. Once again, you have to understand that you are absolutely entitled to determine the value of your service. There is going to be a set of rates that I'm going to show you here, but it doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't mean I'm wrong either. Okay? As such, there are a set of reasonably accepted rates. These are based on both research undertaken by the Global Investigative Journalism Network and my own experience, having worked in the industry for the past 15 years. How much should a production assistant be paid? Working with a major news organization or a big crew such as CNN, BBC, Deutsche Welle, New York Times, or Euronews, or Al Jazeera, you can ask between $300 to $450 a day. This is the recommended rate. Once again, as I said before, you're absolutely entitled to determine the value of your services. And if you feel and if you think that, yes, what I am doing is worth more than this, you should feel not afraid and not ashamed to ask for more. Okay? Working with an established solo foreign correspondent funded by a news organization, you can ask between $200 to $350 a day. Working with a freelance reporter, photographer, or filmmaker who is funding their own assignments, you can charge them on a reasonably accepted rate between $50 to $150 a day. Why this rate is so low? It is because these freelance reporters, they are funding themselves. They don't have any particular assignment coming from anybody. What they do is they travel on their own, and I did that several times by myself. They travel on their own, and then they produce a photo story, or they write a story, or they produce a video story. And if they're lucky enough to sell it, they will sell it, and they will not be paid as much as to be able to afford anything more than $50 or $150 a day of a production assistant. Sometimes they don't even get covered even for that. And believe it or not, I did have such experiences. This is the reason why I speak about 9 languages since I started working as a freelancer, because in most of many cases when I traveled by myself, I knew I didn't have enough budget to pay a production assistant for me. Therefore, I had to learn the local language in order to kind of help myself by walking around and moving around and chasing stories. Note, some freelancers are really good at selling their work and therefore may well be able to pay you as much as a news organization. You know, some freelancers, they just have enough money, but also they have enough very good contacts with established newspapers and magazines or television, and they are very sure that they will sell their story for big bucks. And if they do, if they know that they can do it, these people will offer you by themselves the actual rate. They will say, "Oh no, you're asking me for $50? No, I can pay you $350 a day." And I had several situations like that, because I was one of those some time ago where I knew I could sell my stories pretty easy. And so I could get big bucks out of the news organization. So I would often end up paying my production assistants really a good, reasonable rate. So if you're a driver, that means if you have a driving license and you would like to use your own car for the transportation means for the news crew or the foreign correspondent you're working with, please charge for the usage of the car and ask for all petrol to be paid. Also, request a $500 deposit in case your car gets damaged. You're working in a war zone, your car can be, I don't know, landing on a landmine, or can be bombed, or can be taken over by a building after it has been bombed, and so on and so forth. What should the production assistant do or know before working with a freelance correspondent? This is very important, because you may have to understand that not all freelance correspondents are genuine. Of course, many of them, significant majority of them are genuine, but some are dodgy. And that's very sad to say so. So, when you're working with a freelance correspondent, inquire or ask if they have undertaken a recent hostile environment first aid training course, and ask to see a digital proof of their certification. Okay? For example, everyone that does a HAFAT course, they have a certification. It's a digital one. So it's impossible to not have it in today's world. So you can ask for it. If they say yes, you can ask them to show you the certificate. Okay? Respectfully ask them to vouch for their professional credentials by sharing with you a link to their website or online portfolio and proof of their press accreditation. You have the right to ask a freelance correspondent, freelance foreign correspondent, you have the right to ask them to prove that they are an actual accredited journalist, that they have credentials. You have the right to ask them to prove that their work has been previously published somewhere, or that they have a website or a portfolio somewhere online. Specifically, if they come from the West, it is impossible for them to not have a website. So please, if they are a freelancer, you have to verify their credentials. You have to make sure you're working with an actual foreign correspondent that is a member of the press, and it's not some thing that we don't know who they are. Ask if they are a member of a national union of journalists, and if they are, contact that body to verify their membership. For example, if I come to Ukraine, I will come as a freelance foreign correspondent. And of course, you can expect me that I should have this press card, which is issued by the National Union of Journalists in the United Kingdom. I hope you can see it. And I will show this to you, and I have a membership number, and you can write to my union and say, is this gentleman with this name and last name, with this number, membership number, an accredited journalist in the United Kingdom? They should respond to you, and they should be able to verify that. Okay? I also have an International Federation of Journalists International Press card. Same you can do with this. You can ask International Federation of Journalists to verify and confirm whether the number on my card is something that they have on their records. Okay? Don't just believe people just because they show you a card. Okay? The fact that they show you a card, that means they are accredited, but you do have the right to verify. And the way to verify is take their card number and ask the actual institution that issued that card if they have that number on their record with that name and that last name of the foreign correspondent. This way, you will assure yourself that you are working with a genuine member of the press who is not a dodgy person, but who is there after the story to tell the world what's happening. What else should a production assistant know about working with a freelancer? It may be financially impossible for them to bring along essential safety equipment for you. Okay? What you can expect from a news crew coming from a big news network, you kind of shouldn't really expect coming from a freelance foreign correspondent because they just don't have enough funds. So you can expect that it may be financially impossible for them to bring along essential safety equipment for you. Some, indeed, many of them sadly, don't bring such equipment even for themselves. Taking flak jackets or ballistic helmets across the borders or through airports, it is extremely difficult, and in most countries, it is illegal. It is a logistical nightmare and very expensive to do so for a freelance foreign correspondent. If I were to come to Ukraine, for example, or to Tigray or to Somalia, whatever the countries, I could probably get through the border with one bulletproof jacket. But if I am bringing a second one, the authorities immediately will suspect me for some weird allegations. Therefore, I need to have extra licenses to bring about the second flak jacket or the ballistic helmet. And it can be very expensive and it can take time. And also it can be expensive to pay extra cargo place for those equipment. Therefore, because I'm not a news crew, I don't belong to a news network, it is logistically very difficult for me to travel if I have to carry those equipment with me. So realistically speaking, if it is a freelancer, you really might not expect, and you might not want to put as a criteria the previous conditions that I set when you work with a news organization. If you decide to work with a freelancer, you should therefore give a serious consideration to securing for yourself a bulletproof jacket and a helmet, as well as a personal first aid kit. Find it somewhere in your home country. Ask a international media center that might have been already established, like in the case in Ukraine. Reporters Without Borders have established a media center in Lviv, and they're trying their best to bring with the logistics to bring flak jackets, ballistic helmets for reporters, whether it be national or international correspondents that can't logistically travel with a bulletproof jacket through airports. Therefore, those are available there. So if you are working as a production assistant in your native country, please secure yourself a bulletproof jacket, a ballistic helmet, and a first aid kit. At the same time, and if your circumstances allow you to do so, please secure safety equipment for your freelance co-worker too. But it goes without saying that they must pay for it, not you. If securing the safety equipment for your colleague that's coming from abroad to work together and they are freelancer requires to pay, then you have to make it clear to them that they will have to pay for it. Okay? You don't pay for it. Solidarity saves lives. Right. So this is the end of this course. I have to be very thankful to copy editor Jill Wing and supervisor Dr. Defina Pata, and very much thanks to Pierre Alozi, Julia Francis, Cynthia D'Ambrosi, and Photojournalism Hub in London, Philip North, Combase, and the Photographers United, who has peer-reviewed this course. I will now exit the share of the screen, and also will stop the broadcasting of this workshop live, and hopefully we can reconnect and talk more about the course. So if